Between 1850 and 1950, America underwent radical change. We can start with Hawaii in the 1920s and before. It was a Polynesian empire up until 1898, when the rise of nationalism and the aftermath of the Spanish-American War led the U.S. to annexing several territories, leading for non-native businessmen and native Hawaiians to fight over control of the government. With that political turmoil that America caused Hawaii came an exchange of cultures, especially between southeastern U.S. musicians and Hawaiian guitarists and ukulele players. I was never so taken aback in my life. I was always afraid of things that worked the first time. Thomas A. Edison, on hearing his voice play back to him from his first tinfoil phonograph. Between 1877 and the turn of the 20th century, the ability to record onto Edison cylinders gave rise to shellac discs, which by 1900 to 1926 were recorded between 78 to 80 rotations per minute, later standardized to 78 RPM records, which were the main medium up until 1959 of releasing two songs, one on side A and one on side B, usually around 3 minutes each. In 1960s, these discs were changed from shellac to vinyl. Shellac, being made out of beetles, was more fragile, more glass-like, and heavy to carry, whereas vinyl was more durable, less fragile, and lighter to carry, with less rotations per minute and higher capacity, fitting which is called an album. Originally a book of 78 RPM songs onto one disc at 33 and a third rotations per minute, with around 12 songs total. Many recordings flourished with 78 RPM recording companies between that period of time of 1900 and 1959, and recording companies rose up to the highest they ever probably gotten as far as like real value before and after the Great Depression, covering all genres from classical to folk to blues, jazz, and in its later days, rock and roll and country. Between 1844 and 1864, American composer Stephen Foster composed classics like Oh Susanna, Camptown Races, and Hard Times Come Again No More, inspiring many folk and popular music genres that succeeded the era of the Civil War and Romantic period of music. His parlor and folk songs have been immortalized in Looney Tunes, they were sang in minstrel shows, they were covered by folk revivals of the 1930s and later in the 60s during the most famous folk revival movement. After the era of Stephen Foster came the era of the post-Civil War Reformation, so-called Reformation, when black musicians like Scott Joplin was pioneering ragtime and W.C. Handy was pioneering blues. Scott Joplin composed the two most famous ragtime hits, The Entertainer and Maple Leaf Rag, published in 1902 and 1899 respectively. He pioneered the genre with a mixture of Texarkana music from his home, classical compositions, gospel, work songs, and blues from its very early stages. Meanwhile, as early as the 1490s, the Caribbean has been invaded and conquered by European colonizers who established the Bahamas as a British colony in 1717, where this song, sung here by the Phoenix Singers, takes place in the time of 1929 following the story of a devastating hurricane. The Caribbean as a whole has been more of a melting pot than America of African, indigenous, European, and Latin American genres like salsa, reggae, hip-hop, and jazz. Gospel had a huge comeback in the 1920s when recordings started to flourish. Prohibition began around a huge evangelical movement which fought against school teachings of evolution, but also fought for women's suffrage, which had ties to the religious and anti-alcohol movement. The religious side continued on even after the end of Prohibition in 1933, when the Great Depression devastated America, along with a great flood in the South, a Dust Bowl in the Midwest and South, the rise of fascism internationally, and labor laws and progressive movements began to form under the First and Second New Deal between 1933 and 1938 by the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. In these religious recordings, we can really get a grasp of pre-recording era religious music, because a lot of it was passed down orally by the church and culturally through the family. But this little brief history here is to sort of wrap things up before we start talking about the song catchers. And song catchers really were a big part of the recording industry, allowing for some of the most unknown names. They are still unknown today, but it's kind of difficult because, a name like Tommy Johnson, for example, we hear it in the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? We hear it when we talk about Robert Johnson, the more famous blues man of the Delta blues era. But people like him were able to record their stuff because of song catchers, which we will get into next. Buddy William Ledbetter was an American musician. In between 1915 and 1939, he served several prison and jail terms in Louisiana. He had several charges against him, one of them being murder, and he was sentenced to 30 years. He did get pardoned by a governor in 1925, and then later on was discovered in the Angola Penitentiary by folklorists John Lomax and Alan Lomax. And as they were traveling the South as a project to preserve traditional music for the Library of Congress, they found Huddy William Ledbetter, who was known later in life as Lead Belly. And they recorded him singing the song Goodnight Irene, along with a song called Governor O.K. Allen, and it was a petition to get him released after almost serving all of his minimum sentence. And the Lomaxes took that record and successfully got him freed from prison. And, it did have everything to do with his singing, but they later wrote to the Lomaxes that it didn't have to do with the singing. Rambling round your city, rambling round your town, I never see a friend I know, long as I ramble round. In 1939, Alan Lomax dropped out of college to get Lead Belly out of prison again. He was quite a troublemaker. And him and his father, John Lomax, had quarrels with Lead Belly and his then wife, Martha. And it was mostly over the money they gave him going towards his drinking habit. But in 1939, Lead Belly performed with a lot of big names like Pete Seeger, the Weavers, Brownie McGee, Sonny Terry, who you hear playing harmonica earlier in Goodnight Irene. But also a notable name, Woody Guthrie, who wrote the Ramblin' Round version of Goodnight Irene. As the Lomaxes continued their southern journey, they would have Lead Belly travel with them, and he would record the bulk of the songs they collected. And he would learn from people that they found in towns all over the South and various places of the Midwest as well, I believe. And a lot of times, the song catchers, the likes of Alan Lomax, he would have Lead Belly record these songs and basically sell records to, I guess, sort of fund his project of field recordings, where you get a lot of prison recordings, home recordings, just traveling around catching songs. We're going to get more into that, how the Carter family did it, how Jimmy Rogers did it, and Lead Belly was involved, and later on, the likes of Woody Guthrie, he was profoundly moved by Lead Belly's records, as well as Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. They were all performers together in New York City in 1939. A lot of times we associate all those guys together because of Bob Dylan in the 1960s, who covered them a lot and basically adopted their styles during his folk era. Bob Dylan was also, directly references them in the song called Song to Woody on his first album. But yeah, I would urge you to go out and find anything recorded by Alan Lomax. Find many artists that way. You'll also find a lot if you look through the Harry Smith anthology. There's more folklorists than just Alan Lomax and his father, John Lomax. And there's more folk singers than Lead Belly and Woody Guthrie. And we will delve into folk music of America, white and black, and all cultures inside of America. And I think that to get these guys sort of briefed and brought up is good, because as we mentioned in an earlier segment about W.C. Handy, it's kind of good to preserve history and culture, whether you're composing like W.C. Handy and adopting melodies, or if you're petitioning to the governor to get released from jail for murder. You can sing songs you learned in prison, songs such as The Midnight Special, House of the Rising Sun, which you'll hear me playing Lead Belly's version in this video. I learned it from my guitar teacher, who taught me a lot about blues and folk and Americana picking. And yeah, I think we can cut it off there. But like I said, go check out anything Alan Lomax, Smithsonian, Harry Smith anthology, anything Mo Ash has recorded. If you like folk music, you'll find a lot of folk music in those recordings. You'll also find country blues, country gospel, and many other genres. The Lomaxes probably have the biggest collection, and they're about to, most of them are in the public domain, but they're about to really do a big database release, I think, on the internet. I need to check more into that, but yeah, enjoy this next little bit here. It's just an instrumental I came up with. It doesn't have a name.
on Honolulu Bay. And all the beaches are full of peaches who bring their youth along. And in the glimmer of the moonlight, they love to sing this song. If you like a ukulele lady, ukulele lady like you. If you like to linger where it's shady, ukulele lady linger too. If you kiss a ukulele lady,